Thank you very much. My name is Geertjan. I'm a product manager at Netbeans. Thank you very much for coming to this session. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. It's the second time I'm here, and I really, really like Istanbul very much. I'm very happy to be here. It's a great way to end the year of conferences. There are many conferences every year, and I really, every year, want to come to this one because it's in Istanbul, and it's such a nice place, and the people are so warm and friendly. In this session, I want to talk about surviving life in the JavaScript ecosystem. I myself come from a Java background, and many Java developers are looking at the JavaScript ecosystem and kind of wondering what to do with it. I'm kind of wondering who you are. So who here would describe themselves as Java developers? Okay, put your hands up very high. High. Okay. So, and who here would not describe themselves as a Java developer? You are not a Java developer, but you do JavaScript. Okay. So this, in this session, I'm really looking at the world of JavaScript, in particular from a point of view of somebody who is a Java developer. But I think you will gain some insights either way. To start with, somebody said to me recently that, that when you are born, you kind of look at the world in a very open way. You look at the world as it is new and interesting, and you're very excited. And this is also how we look at technology initially. We see everything around us when we just get started with being a programmer, being in the software industry, and we find everything around us interesting and new and fresh. And then later on, in the real world and in software development, when we're maybe in our 20s, when you're a student, anything that's new is very exciting and revolutionary. Everything that comes up and that is new, if you're kind of this age, if you're kind of in your 20s, then anything that's new is adventurous and interesting and you want to learn about it. However, if you're kind of in your 30s and 40s and kind of a bit like me, anything that is new, you look at with concern, and you look at things and you're a bit upset, and you think to yourself, why can't things stay the way they were before? Why must things change? Java was fantastic. Why must we use this stupid language called JavaScript now? This is the way many Java developers feel. Why must we use this stupid language called JavaScript? It's not type safe. It's horrible. Everything changes all the time. So this is the way many Java developers feel. And I can see quite a few Java developers are smiling here because this is the way that you feel, and this is the way that I feel about a lot of these things in the JavaScript ecosystem. So I want to talk about how we can kind of handle this change in technology. Because the way that the JavaScript world presents itself to us is we have this wonderful ecosystem, we have these wonderful new technologies. You can come and use all these new cool frameworks, come and use Angular, come and use this, come and use Mockito, come and use all these unit testing frameworks, come and use Protractor, come and use everything, come and use Grunt, come and use Gulp, come and use all of these frameworks. But this guy is still looking like that because of this situation. Now, if you're a JavaScript developer, you look at all these frameworks and you say to the world, this is wonderful, we have so much to offer, you can come and learn about all these interesting frameworks, you can create very exciting applications on the client, on the browser, and you'll be very happy here. And there are so many different frameworks that you can choose. There's so many choices that you have. But the Java developer still looks at it like this, because there are too many choices, first of all, in this JavaScript landscape. And the other thing is that these choices change a lot. Things that you have learned yesterday are out of date tomorrow. So for example, Grunt. A couple of years ago, everyone was saying Grunt is the best build system for JavaScript. In the meantime, people are saying Gulp is the best build system for JavaScript. And if you think Gulp is the best build system for JavaScript, apparently you're wrong, because the new best build system for JavaScript is called Brunch. And if you didn't know that, you should look up Brunch, because Brunch is apparently the new best build system for JavaScript. And this ecosystem is constantly changing. And it's understandable that somebody like me and somebody like this guy is a bit upset about this, because how can you use anything in this ecosystem that is constantly changing? It doesn't make any sense. But I think I should, and this guy should, and if you're thinking like that, we should all take one step backwards. Just for a moment, and not get very upset, take one step backwards and look at the world as it is right now. Now you can see here there are two people. There's this one guy on the right, and he's reading a magazine, and there's a person on the left with a tablet. Now let's look a little bit more at this person on the left. Person on the left could be many of you here, in fact. Born with the internet, went to school, high school, college, university with Google, learned everything via Google, has a smartphone. You can even see that my word processor doesn't even recognize smartphone. There's a red underline here. So using smartphone, using tablets, always online, constantly online, reading everything online, with a smartphone in their hand, reading magazines, and not really reading books anymore. A lot of young people don't read books anymore. Read short articles online, and wouldn't find their way home without a GPS on their phone. And don't buy torches, for example. I've heard that there's a big decline in the torch market, in the flashlight market, because you've got a flashlight on your phone. And people aren't buying flashlights anymore because their smartphone has a flashlight. So it's a whole new world. So this is kind of the person of the future, and even the person of right now. So this is what we would call a digital native, kind of born in this new world of tablets and browsers and this kind of ecosystem. Now, a digital immigrant is somebody like me and many people here. We still remember what books look like. We used to read books. We used to read magazines, hard copy magazines that you would turn over with your hand instead of swiping. You know, I didn't have a Commodore. I had a ZX Spectrum in the 90s. I had a game computer, and that's how many people my age learned how to program. We initially played games on the Commodore and on ZX Spectrum, and then we started hacking the games, and we were playing games. That's how we learned. But that's not how people are learning nowadays anymore. So we have a phone and a tablet, people who are digital immigrants, but we are not as embedded in them as digital native people are. So it's a very, and we can remember typewriters. I can also remember a dial phone. I used to have to dial on this dial thing, and many people will not be familiar with that anymore either. So there's a real technology change that's been going on. And maybe that angry-looking guy, and if you are this person, need to step back and just think about that and think about what the consequences of that are. And I want to guide you through a couple of thoughts about that. So in this session, Surviving Life in the JavaScript Ecosystem, we're going to start from our safe home on top of a mountain that seems very safe. And we know all of our Java libraries, and we know all of our Java code, and we know our network, and we know the conferences we go to, and we know many examples, and we know GitHub, and we have so many things in the Java ecosystem that we're very familiar with, and we're very safe in our home on this hill. However, once we take one small step out of our safe environment, this is what we discover. And there's this, obviously, this very big new world of the JavaScript ecosystem that is kind of very unsafe, insecure. You know, what do we do with it? What kind of applications can we really build in this ecosystem? Is it all about games? Is it all about small applications? Or can we do something more exciting with it? Does it make sense to create enterprise applications with JavaScript? It seems like most people using JavaScript are creating games of some kind, or they're creating pretty small applications that are not really that meaningful. Can you create meaningful applications in JavaScript? So there's all these different frameworks, you know, Backbone and Ext and Ember and Angular and Knockout for the front end and Meteor. And then there are libraries in JavaScript for modularization, for creating a modular enterprise application like Browserify, and there's Require.js, and there's React, and then there's a bunch of JavaScript libraries that are basically the base libraries on top of JavaScript, like Prototype and jQuery and jQuery UI and so on. And then there's a whole bunch of testing JavaScript frameworks like Jasmine and Karma, and many people are creating these applications in JavaScript because you want to be on mobile devices. So there's Android and there's iOS, and there's Cordova or PhoneGap for converting applications to those platforms. And there's Bower, which is kind of comparable to what Maven does with dependency management, and there's Yeoman for scaffolding your application, and there's Node. You can even write JavaScript applications on the back end. So it's a really big landscape, and we can't talk about all of this in the 45 minutes that we've got. So I want to focus on two specific solutions. In all of this landscape, I want to focus on two of them. And I want to focus on two specific ones for two specific reasons. First of all, these solutions are brand new. These are new solutions. And you might think, oh no, more stuff in this landscape. But the second really interesting thing about these solutions is that they are both based on other solutions. So they are built on top of these other JavaScript frameworks and libraries. So I'm going to introduce you to two new ways of approaching the JavaScript landscape. And they're kind of different, and one is very JavaScript focused, while the other one is much more Java focused. So the first one will be very interesting to you if you are already doing JavaScript development, or if you're interested in becoming a JavaScript developer and you want to create enterprise applications. So that's the first one. This is called the Oracle Java Extension Toolkit, and I'll talk a bit about that, and I'll do some demonstrations. And the second one is really interesting if you want to target the browser on devices, like on tablets, on mobile phones, but you want to stay in Java. You don't want to leave Java. You want to continue coding in Java, but you want to somehow get your Java code into browsers on different devices. The other good thing about both of these solutions is that they are free and open source. These are both free and open source solutions. And the site for the first one is oraclejet.org, and the second one is dukescript.com. Okay, so to begin with the first one, Oracle Jet. Now, Oracle Jet is a very interesting project. So if I go to the website, so this is what it looks like if you go to oraclejet.org. This is a website and a product that was launched during October, so last month. It's completely new. It was launched at Java 1 and at Open World in San Francisco. And it's not a library, so it's not oraclejet.js, like Knockout.js or whatever JS. It's not a framework like Angular. Instead, it's a toolkit. It's a combination of a bunch of open source libraries. So these specifically, so it uses jQuery, jQuery UI, Knockout, Require, and Hammer, and then it adds to it a bunch of data visualization components. Now, it's new in a sense that it's just been announced, but in fact, it's been used for 3 years already. It's been used for 3 years within Oracle. So Oracle is very interested in being a cloud company now. So everything is about the cloud. It's about mobile cloud service and IoT cloud service and all kinds of cloud services. But having a series of cloud services and putting data into the cloud doesn't make sense unless you can do something with that data once it is in the cloud. So what Oracle has been doing is creating a JavaScript-based framework for visualizing the data that is in the cloud. So there are a bunch of JavaScript components written in jQuery UI, and I will show you the most interesting ones. These data visualizations. So there is no open source library in the JavaScript ecosystem that provides charts and graphs and maps and gauges and diagrams like this. So out of the box, when you use Jet, you automatically get access to all of these charts. And this is relevant, very relevant to Oracle, because Oracle wants to give customers of Oracle Cloud Services the possibility to create applications that access those services. And the way to do that is to use charts and maps and gauges to very easily visualize that data that is in the cloud. Now, to get started with Jet, it's a question of simply downloading a zip file that contains the JavaScript and the CSS and the HTML. It's purely a front-end framework. It's just client-side. You can use it in any editor or IDE you want. And then you can start creating your application. And I have here an example to show you this in practice. So I'm going to start it up. And what you see here is basically the reference implementation of Oracle Jet. So this is, it looks like a normal JavaScript application, like any other JavaScript application. And it is. But instead of using Angular or using some other framework, it's using Oracle Jet. And because it's using Oracle Jet, it's got some really cool components that are built into it. So you can see here these charts. You need to somehow visualize these charts. And by default, there aren't any charts in the JavaScript ecosystem. Not as effective and as well animated and well performant as these are. And these have been used, as I said, for the last 3 years already in Oracle to create JavaScript-based applications. What's also very important when you are creating large applications for the enterprise is that you have accessibility and modularity as part of your application. So for modularity, most people in the JavaScript ecosystem are using Require.js. And Require.js is simply a part of this toolkit. So it's a toolkit, it's simply a collection of open source libraries plus these JavaScript components. To show you a very simple example, so I've shown you the complex example, but I'll show you now the simple example Oracle Jet application that gives us a split of the browser into 3 areas. And you can see here there are tabs, and this is what you would want. If you're creating a JavaScript application, you want to somehow break up the information into different parts. You want to have tabs. But what you also want is when you change the screen resolution, for example, to portrait, you want the application to still look good. You can see the application still looks good here. And also the more complex one, you can see here, this looks great. And this is built in to that framework. So you don't have to add responsive design into the application. And what is used here is not responsive CSS, but responsive JavaScript. And that's built in to this toolkit. So that's one thing you want. If you're creating a larger application, you want responsive design. And what you also want is accessibility. So that when the user clicks on the keyboard, that the graphs and the charts and whatever, that they change and that there's actual responsiveness to the keyboard and to voice. So that people who have problems seeing or hearing, that they can interact with the application anyway. And this is a typical requirement for enterprise applications. And typically, you need to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do that. So this is also part of this toolkit already. So built in is accessibility, is modularity, and are these data containing these data visualization charts and maps and so on. So what does one of these applications look like? So what I have here is, let me show you that simple application. So what I'm showing you now is this one. Okay. So I'm going to make it smartphone portraits so that we can see them next to each other. And what I can see is now, okay, here's the browser. And here is my development environment. And now because I'm using Netbeans, I can connect the two together. And you can see that when I have opened the browser DOM window, as I click on items in that browser, I can see where those items are found back in the development environment. So that's really helpful. So normally you would have no idea where something is found. And this interaction between the browser and between Netbeans is really what makes it easy to create any kind of JavaScript application. So here is, I click on there, I go from here into the source, and here is that source. Okay, so here we go. So here we can see that content. What does this application look like? Well, it simply has a bunch of JavaScript. So here are modules. So this is something that you would need to implement yourself if you are not using Jet through Require or Browser Verify. And there is these HTML files. So on the one hand, we have JavaScript. On the other side, we have HTML. And together, they form modules, thanks to Require. So this is nothing special. This is not created by Jet. If you look at the libraries, so these are standard open source libraries. We have Crossroads, we have Promise, Hammer, History, jQuery, Signals, Knockout, Require, and then we have OJ, which is Oracle Jet. And in here, we see simply a long list of jQuery UI components. So data grids, diagrams, dialogues, all kinds, a whole library of components that you can use in your code. So how do we use these in our code? If I look in this header, for example, so here I can see that we have a component here, OJ button. So the way that we are declaring components here in HTML follows Knockout. So if you use Knockout, it's a two-way data binding library, which I'm using here for this OJ component. And now I can use code completion, and I can see all the available Knockout components and their related documentation. And what's also really nice here is that I can use code completion here and see the properties that relate to that specific Jet component. So here I'm using OJ button. So the properties available in the code completion are the properties that relate to OJ button. So let's use a different one. So if I use OJ chart, and now I use code completion, and now I see the properties that relate to OJ chart. So the point here is you can use Oracle Jet with any IDE or with any editor that you like. It's simply a front-end client-side framework. But if you use it with Netbeans, then you get code completion like you are seeing here built into it automatically. And also what you get is a template to get started. So here I have an Oracle Jet Quick Start Basic, and I have an example to help me get started. So Netbeans definitely helps a lot if you're doing Oracle Jet, but you don't need to use Netbeans. You can use anything at all. So here are my templates. Here is my SCSS, so here's my SAS templates and so on. Here's my JavaScript, all neatly organized, and there are many style sheets that are included automatically. So that's basically what Jet is about. It's aimed at if you are a medium to advanced JavaScript developer, you want to create enterprise applications. You want to create your applications in the same way as Oracle has been doing for 3 years. You need data visualizations, you need charts and maps and gauges and so on. You want to visualize data in the cloud. That's a typical use case. You want to have modularity and accessibility and internationalization and these kinds of concerns handled by the toolkit so that you can focus on your business logic. In the first place, so it was announced during October at Open World and Java 1 as being ready for Oracle Cloud customers. So it means if you're using Oracle Mobile Cloud Services, Oracle IoT Cloud Services, things like that, then you can use this for free in production. If you're not doing that, then you can play with this and whatever, but you can't use it in production yet. But next year, this is going to be open sourced. Oracle Jet will be available on GitHub. It's never been the intention for Oracle Jet to compete with Angular and with React and things like that. It's always initially been intended to be a way for Oracle customers to display data that they have on the Oracle Cloud. However, I think once this is on GitHub, it will be a very interesting solution, and it should be something that you should include when you are evaluating Angular and React and the other frameworks. Because this really offers some interesting ideas. And one of those ideas, comparing this to Angular, is that this is a modular toolkit. So all these component parts, these open source libraries that are in this toolkit are optional. Whereas with Angular, if you're using Angular, you know you have to use the whole Angular story. You have to use factories and services, and these are all strange concepts that you have to learn. With Jet, you can choose which parts you want to include or exclude. You can even use Jet together with Angular. So I've created many examples where you have an Angular application and you can include Jet components into it. So if you want to use maps and charts in your Angular application, you can include Jet in your Angular application and use it there. So all of that is possible. It's a very flexible modular framework. And personally, I work for Oracle. I used to be part of Sun Microsystems. In 2010, Oracle bought Sun Microsystems, I was working on Netbeans. I'm still working on Netbeans. I was very worried at the time. I was thinking, I have to quit. I don't want to work for Oracle. I like open source. But I'm still working there, and I'm still working on Netbeans, and I'm also working on Oracle Jet, because I really think this is a nice solution, and also because it's going to be open sourced and on GitHub. I'm really excited about this, and I hope that you have seen some of the main points of it. So that's the first of the two new solutions I wanted to talk about. Now the second one is, the second solution I want to look at is also pretty new, not as new as Oracle Jet, but this is for you if you really don't like JavaScript at all. But you realize that the browser has as its language JavaScript. So JavaScript is really the assembly language of the browser. There is a one-to-one relationship between JavaScript and browser, just like any other assembly language. So I want to talk to you about a second solution. And this is not from Oracle. It's just a great solution out there. A bunch of friends of mine work on this. And I want to just briefly talk about this. The homepage of it is jukescript.com. So the way to approach this particular framework, so this is not a toolkit or a library, this is really a framework. The way to approach this is to think to yourself, JavaScript is the assembly language of the web. So the browser needs JavaScript. That's why you're using JavaScript. There's a one-to-one relationship between the language and the machine. And here the machine is JavaScript. So it's in a way, when you think about JavaScript as assembly language, you think to yourself, it doesn't look like assembly language to me. This is assembly language. JavaScript doesn't look like that, does it? Or does it? This is JavaScript on the right. It looks worse than the other JavaScript, than the other assembly language on this slide to me. I can't imagine writing what I see there on the right. But that's, if you're a happy JavaScript developer, good luck to you. But this is what you're doing, right? This is what JavaScript is like. And many Java developers cannot see themselves writing this kind of stuff. So I want to give some hope to hardcore Java developers out there. We can continue using Java, despite the fact that we need JavaScript in the browser. So JukeScript offers this as a solution. And you can kind of compare this in a way to what Google Web Toolkit does and what Vaadin does, but it's a bit different again. So JukeScript starts from the idea that every device, whether it's a mobile device or a tablet or your desktop computer, every device has a browser. Secondly, every device can have Java on it. So on iOS, you can have RoboVM. On Android, you can have Delvik. And on your desktop computer, you have the JVM, you have Hotspot. So what JukeScript does is it combines all of those existing technologies into one whole. And it says to you here, use these together coherently as one. Use Java and use HTML for the front end. So you can really split up your application in the way that people want to do. You want to give your front end, you want to give your HTML to a front end designer. And you, as a Java developer, want to code your business logic in Java. So that's the idea here. So here you can see in the image on the left, on all the devices, we have a JVM of some kind, RoboVM, Delvik, Hotspot. On all the devices, we have an HTML renderer. And then JukeScript is there to combine those different pieces together. Now, if you compare this to, on the image on the right, you see Grit and JukeScript. Now, what Grit is, it's not a front-end technology. It really is a server, a client-server type, Java EE type framework. You do write your code, your front-end code in Java. And if you use Vaadin, it's kind of a Swing-like component model. If you're using Vaadin, then you're coding your front end in Java in something that looks a bit like Swing. But in modern applications, what you'd like to do is give your front end, give all your front end stuff to a front end designer who doesn't know anything about Java. So give them the HTML, and then do your coding, do your business logic in Java. The basis of this, what makes this possible, is Knockout. So here we can see a very small Knockout application. And Knockout is focused purely on data binding. Now here we can see some HTML, a first name, P tag, last name, P tag, and an H2. And you can see here we have two input elements with a data bind to a property called first name and a property called last name. And here we have the matching JavaScript. So in the JavaScript, what we can see is here is a property. Now this is a property in Knockout. And it's an observable property, which means you don't have to create getters and setters. Knockout will observe changes for you and do two-way data binding. And here is the last name. And again, it's not a string, it's an observable property that Knockout tracks. And if you make a change in the view, then automatically the model will be updated. And in the third place, what we see here is full name. And what full name is it's a computed property. So it's not a property like the other ones, but it's one that is computed based on the first name and the last name. And here we can see in the view, we can see first name, last name, and full name. Now what JavaScript allows us to do is to use this HTML front end exactly as it is, but we can write what you can see here in JavaScript, we can write that in Java instead of JavaScript. So there's a plugin for that in Netbeans, but again, you can use any tool you want. And you can step through this wizard, and it lets you point to somewhere on disk. You can create your project, and you can say, do you want this application to be deployed to Android or to iOS, or should it be in the browser? And then once you click finish, what you get is a Maven archetype. So I'll show you this. So here is a Maven archetype. It's a Maven multi-module archetype. So you can use any IDE that supports Maven with this. So we can see here client for the web. We can see client for Android. And we can see here general client code. Now what this is, the first one is when I run this, I will get a Javafx web view. When I run this, the second one, the browser will open and the Java code will have been transpiled by JavaScript to JavaScript. So JavaScript will take my Java code and itself will transpile it from Java to JavaScript, and I will see it in the browser. And then I will also have an APK file. So let's take a look at the client code here. So all the code is in one place. So I have here a data model, and I have some dummy code in here. I'm just going to delete this here, and I'm left now with just a starting point. Now, what you see here is a property and a computed property, exactly like we saw in the Knockout example. Here we have a property called first name, and a property last name, and a computed property. So first name, so here's a property. So we use these annotations that at compile time turn into a plain old Java object. Now I can see here I have first name, and yes, I have a type system because I'm using Java. This is wonderful. I can stay with my type system. So I have first name and last name, and so the computed property, what will it be? So I will here return a full name, and the full name will be built up out of the first name as well as the last name. Okay, so it will return first name plus last name. So this code that you see here is exactly the same as we see here in JavaScript, but now we're expressing it in Java. So now we need to set the first name here. So here's the first name. You can see planet and Earth. Okay, so we'll use that. So it's really nice with the type system. We can use things like code completion, and refactoring is much better in a type-safe with a type-safe language. So planet, Earth. So what we see is that we can use a type system which is much better for tooling, much better for refactoring, much better for editing. And now we have expressed exactly the same as we had in our JavaScript. So now I will run this application, but first we want to create the view. So here is the view. It's HTML. And if we were using Grit or Vaadin, we would be using Java for this. So I want to delete all of the stuff that you see here. And here's my HTML. I'll just copy and paste it. It's exactly the same as in Knockout. It's only the business logic that is expressed in Java. So here we go. So you can see here, first name, last name, full name. Okay, so now we run the application. And what will now open is a Javafx web view. So this is a desktop application that we've created. So here I'll say Planet Earth, and I'll change this to something different. And you can see that it updates itself. Hello, Istanbul. This is exactly the same as what the application does that we had here with the business logic in JavaScript. So here is our desktop application. But now we can also run it into the browser, that same application. And we can also create an APK file from that same application. So let's go to my web app. So if I run this, browser will open, and I'll have exactly the application without touching JavaScript. If you're a Java developer, you should be really happy when you see this. We're not touching JavaScript. We're getting JavaScript somehow magically, but we're not touching it at all. So just because the browser needs JavaScript doesn't mean that you, as a developer, need to have JavaScript. So that's basically the two solutions I want to offer you that are new and interesting. So you can see on the desktop, JavaScript uses Hotspot and the Javafx web view. On Android, it uses Delvik. It uses RoboVM on iOS, and it has its own transpiler for the web, back to browser. So what you've learned about are two specific new solutions that have a number of advantages. And I think the most interesting one is that both of them use existing technologies. I'm personally really tired of waking up in the morning and finding 3 new frameworks every day in the JavaScript ecosystem. And what I would much rather find is, when I wake up, is a toolkit or a solution that says, okay, there are many solutions out there, but what we will try to do is combine those different solutions into something that you can do something meaningful with. Let's try and pull those different pieces together. And that's what both of these solutions try to do. They try and build on existing technology. So Oracle Jet is based on Knockout and on Require for modularity. It's based on jQuery, jQuery UI. If you're doing anything with JavaScript, you know about jQuery UI. And just imagine, once that is open sourced, you will be able to contribute your own graphs and charts to the Oracle Jet project as well. So that's a first really good thing, that these are both built on existing technologies. So JavaScript is based on RoboVM and Delvik on devices, and on the Hotspot on the desktop, and on its own transpiler for the browser. So it's based on existing technology. That's the first really good thing. Second really good thing is they're both free and open source. The first one, not yet, but it will be during the coming year. So they're free and open source. And they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're just trying to combine existing solutions together so that you can create meaningful applications. So instead of this angry-looking guy in the beginning, this is how you should be feeling at this news, at these two technologies that are interesting and worthwhile looking at. And so the conclusion I want to leave you with, to give us a few minutes to ask and answer questions, is surviving the JavaScript ecosystem means being really careful. Be really careful. If you are creating, especially if you are creating a large application, be careful that you don't choose technologies that are going to die tomorrow. Choose things, somehow evaluate things, and choose things that you know will continue to exist for a while. At least long enough for your product to be sold and your customers to be happy. Many applications in the JavaScript ecosystem are quite small, and they're like games and hotel bookings and selling stuff online. If that's what you're doing, it's obviously a good place to be. If you're creating something larger that has to continue to be developed for many years to come, then you have to really be careful about what you choose. And I would suggest these are two solutions that can be used in this context. So oraclejet.org and JavaScript.com, I think, are pretty solid solutions. So my name is Geertjan Wielenga. This is my Twitter handle. Feel free to tweet anything that you've learned here. And also I'm at the Netbeans booth that is out here together with Mark Stevens, who's doing a session at 2 o'clock today in, I forget the name of the room, but at 2 o'clock about Netbeans. So I haven't really discussed Netbeans at all here, but he's going to talk to you about why Netbeans is great and how it is different to other IDEs and tools. It is free and open source. you'll find out why he uses it in his enterprise business. Are there any questions? There's one right at the top there. Yes? I can't hear. There's a microphone coming.
Is there any CRUD part on any JavaScript syntaxes? CRUD means, by the way, create, read, update, delete. Yes,
there are, you know, with Knockout, if we step through this example, you can create quite easily here also a create, read, update, delete type application. You can see here a CRUD application that uses Jersey faces, so Java EE on the back end and this Knockout solution on the front end. That would be one place that you would get started with CRUD development with this. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for coming.